Welcome to my channel, where today I want to tell you a story about 5 minutes that looked completely useless but quietly changed the direction of one young man's entire life. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person destroying your future is not your enemy, not your teacher, not your parents, and not even your circumstances, but the version of yourself that keeps saying, I will start tomorrow. That was Daniel's life. He was young, intelligent, ambitious, and full of dreams. Yet every night he went to bed knowing he had wasted another day. He wanted to become successful. He wanted to speak English confidently. He wanted to study, build a career, make his family proud, and become someone he could respect. But there was one problem he could not escape. Daniel could not focus. He would sit at his desk with a book open in front of him, promise himself that he would study for 1 hour, and then, within 10 minutes, his hand would reach for his phone. At first, he told himself he only needed 5 minutes. 5 minutes to check a message, 5 minutes to watch a short video, 5 minutes to see what was happening online. But 5 minutes became 20. 20 became an hour. Sometimes an entire evening disappeared before Daniel even realized what had happened. His books remained open, his dreams remained untouched, and his phone became the place where his attention went every time his mind became uncomfortable. Daniel knew he had a problem, but knowing was not enough. Every morning he promised himself that today would be different. He would wake up early, study English, complete his assignments, exercise, and stay away from social media. But by afternoon, the same pattern returned. A notification appeared. He checked it. A video appeared. He watched it. Another recommendation appeared. He clicked it. His mind jumped from one thing to another until he could no longer remember what he had originally planned to do. Slowly, Daniel began to hate himself for it. He wondered why everyone else seemed to move forward while he remained trapped in the same place. He watched successful people online and compared his beginning with their achievements. Instead of motivating him, comparison made him feel smaller. He started believing that maybe he was simply lazy, maybe he lacked discipline, maybe he was not intelligent enough to achieve his dreams. Then came the first big failure. Daniel had spent weeks telling his family that he was preparing for an important exam. He spoke confidently about the result he expected, but secretly he knew how little he had actually studied. On the morning of the results, his hands trembled as he opened the message. The score was far below what he needed. For several seconds, he simply stared at the screen. He felt something inside him collapse. His confidence disappeared. The worst part was not the result itself. The worst part was knowing that he had wasted countless hours when he could have prepared. He had no one else to blame. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his room. His phone was beside him, but for the first time, he did not want to touch it. He felt tired of escaping from himself. He looked at his reflection and quietly asked, "How many more times will I promise myself that tomorrow will be different?" He had no answer. The next morning, he told everyone that he would work harder from now on. He said he would become serious, disciplined, and focused. But deep inside, Daniel knew that this was another promise he had made many times before. He did not have a motivation problem. He had a mind control problem. His mind had learned to chase comfort whenever work became difficult. The moment studying felt boring, he escaped. The moment English felt challenging, he avoided it. The moment fear appeared, he distracted himself. Daniel had spent years training his mind to run away, and now he wanted that same mind to suddenly become disciplined. But change would not happen through promises. It would happen through practice. That night, something unexpected happened. While cleaning his room, Daniel found an old notebook hidden beneath a pile of papers. He opened it and discovered a page he had written years earlier. At the top were his dreams. Speak English fluently, get excellent grades, build a successful career, help my family, become confident. Daniel read every line slowly. The words were old, but the dreams were still alive. Then he noticed something that frightened him. The date on the page was from years ago. His goals had not changed, but his life had barely moved. He sat silently, holding the notebook in his hands, and one question entered his mind. If I continue living exactly like this, Where will I be 5 years from now? The question hurt because Daniel already knew the answer. 5 years later, he could still be sitting in the same room, making the same promises, scrolling through the same phone, and wondering why his dreams never became real. For the first time, Daniel understood that his future was not being destroyed in one dramatic moment. It was disappearing quietly, 5 minutes at a time. Every unnecessary scroll, every postponed study session, every ignored opportunity, and every promise delayed until tomorrow was taking something from his future. He closed the notebook and made a decision. He would not try to change his entire life overnight. He would start with something so small that he could not make an excuse. The next morning, Daniel would give himself 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes would be different from every other 5 minutes he had wasted. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual, but his first instinct was the same as always. His hand moved toward his phone before his eyes were fully open. Then he remembered the notebook on his desk and stopped. He looked at the screen, then at the clock, and finally at the notebook. 5 minutes, he reminded himself. That was all he had promised. He placed the phone face down, sat on the edge of his bed, and closed his eyes. He had decided to try meditation. Daniel knew almost nothing about it. He imagined that meditation meant sitting perfectly still with a completely empty mind, and because his mind was always busy, he already expected to fail. Still, he wanted to try. He straightened his back, took a breath, and focused on the air moving through his nose. For approximately 3 seconds, everything felt peaceful. Then his mind exploded. Did I reply to that message? What time is my class? I need to study today. Maybe I should check my phone. What if I fail again? Why am I doing this? Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at the clock. Only 40 seconds had passed. He almost laughed. 5 minutes suddenly felt impossible. He closed his eyes again and tried another time. This time, he remembered something embarrassing that had happened years earlier. Then he thought about an assignment. Then he imagined his future. Then he worried about money. Then he wondered whether meditation was actually a waste of time. His mind refused to stay in one place. After 5 exhausting minutes, Daniel opened his eyes and felt disappointed. I cannot even meditate, he whispered. How am I supposed to change my life? But then he remembered something he had read the night before. Meditation was not about stopping every thought. It was about noticing when the mind wandered and gently bringing it back. The goal was not to become someone who never had distracting thoughts. The goal was to become someone who did not have to follow every thought. Daniel decided to try again. The next morning, he sat for 5 minutes. His mind wandered. He brought it back. It wandered again. He brought it back again. This happened dozens of times, but something important was happening beneath the surface. Daniel was practicing returning. He was teaching his attention that it did not have to obey every impulse. When the 5 minutes ended, he did not feel magically transformed. His problems were still there. His exam result had not changed. His English was not suddenly fluent. His future was still uncertain. But one small thing was different. He had kept a promise to himself. The next day, he did it again. 5 minutes. Then again, 5 minutes. Daniel created one simple rule. No phone before meditation. If he wanted to check social media, he could do it afterward. At first, this rule felt strangely difficult. His hand automatically reached toward his phone. His mind created excuses. Just check one notification. Maybe someone needs you. You can meditate later. But Daniel had heard those excuses before. They were the same excuses that had stolen his time for years. So, he kept the phone away and sat down. Slowly, the 5 minutes became a small island of peace in his chaotic day. Then, one morning, Daniel failed. He woke up late. He was tired. He had an important class. He told himself he would meditate later, but later never came. By afternoon, he was scrolling again. One video became another. His study session disappeared. By evening, he had completed almost nothing. The old Daniel had returned in a single day. That night, he felt frustrated. He wanted to blame himself. He wanted to say, "See? You never change. But instead, he remembered the lesson of meditation. Notice the thought. Do not become the thought. Daniel noticed his disappointment. He noticed his anger. He noticed the voice telling him he was a failure. Then he asked himself a different question. What if missing one day does not mean I have to quit forever? The next morning, he started again. 5 minutes. No punishment, no dramatic promise. Just 5 minutes. This time, Daniel understood something powerful. Discipline did not mean never failing. Discipline meant returning after failure. That idea changed the way he looked at everything. If he missed one study session, he could return. If he made one mistake in English, he could return. If he wasted one afternoon, he could return. He did not have to destroy tomorrow because today had gone badly. Weeks passed. Nothing dramatic happened at first. But slowly, Daniel began noticing small changes. He still used his phone, but he no longer felt the same desperate need to check it every few minutes. Sometimes a notification appeared while he was studying, and he simply ignored it. The first time this happened, he looked at the phone afterward and smiled. It was a tiny victory, but it felt enormous. For years, he had believed the phone controlled him. Now he was discovering that he could choose. One morning, after completing his 5 minutes, Daniel opened his English book. He decided to study for only 10 minutes. He did not promise to study all day. He did not demand perfection. Just 10 focused minutes. He started reading. His mind wandered once. He noticed it and returned to the sentence. It wandered again. He returned. 10 minutes passed, then another 10. Daniel looked at the clock and realized something unbelievable. He had studied for 20 minutes without touching his phone. The old Daniel would have considered that impossible. The new Daniel considered it a beginning. His English practice slowly changed too. Before, he translated every sentence in his head, became frustrated, and quit. Now he was learning to stay patient. He listened to English conversations and focused on meaning instead of trying to understand every single word. He repeated sentences aloud. He made mistakes. He continued anyway. One afternoon, while watching an English lesson, Daniel suddenly understood an entire sentence without translating it into his native language first. He paused the video. For a moment, he simply smiled. It was a small breakthrough, but it gave him hope. His mind was becoming quieter. His focus was becoming stronger. His English was improving. Yet Daniel soon discovered that focus was not his only enemy. There was another wall standing between him and his dream: fear. Daniel could understand English better now, but speaking was different. Whenever he had to speak in front of other people, his heart raced. His mind became empty. He knew the words when he was alone, but when someone looked at him, those words disappeared. He was afraid of making mistakes, afraid of pronunciation, afraid of being judged, afraid of hearing laughter. One day, his teacher asked the class a simple question in English. Daniel knew the answer. He had practiced it many times. His hand almost rose, but fear stopped him. Another student answered. The moment passed. Daniel looked down at his desk and felt disappointed. He realized that meditation had helped him control distractions, but now he had to use that same calmness to face something deeper. He had learned to sit with his thoughts. Now he needed to learn to stand in front of his fear, and soon he would get his first chance. The opportunity came sooner than Daniel expected. One morning, his teacher announced that every student would have to speak briefly in English during the next class. It was not a major presentation. It was only a few sentences. But for Daniel, it felt like a mountain standing directly in front of him. The moment he heard the announcement, his old fears returned. What if I forget the words? What if my pronunciation is wrong? What if everyone laughs? What if I stand there and cannot say anything? Daniel spent the rest of the day thinking about it. He practiced alone in his room. His English was not perfect, but he knew enough to speak. The problem was not his knowledge. The problem was the storm inside his mind. The night before his turn, Daniel sat on his bed with his phone in his hand. He almost opened social media to escape the anxiety. Then he remembered how many times he had used distractions to avoid uncomfortable feelings. He placed the phone down. Instead of running from his fear, he decided to sit with it. Daniel closed his eyes and began his 5-minute meditation. At first, his thoughts were loud. He imagined everyone laughing. He imagined forgetting every word. He imagined embarrassment. But this time, Daniel did something different. He did not argue with the thoughts. He did not try to force them away. He simply noticed them. That is fear, he told himself. It is only a thought. He breathed in slowly. He breathed out slowly. The fear was still there, but Daniel realized something important. Fear could exist without controlling his actions. He could feel nervous and still move forward. The next morning, Daniel walked into class with a strange mixture of confidence and fear. When his teacher called his name, his heart immediately began beating faster. His hands became cold. For 1 second, he wanted to disappear. Then, he remembered his breathing. He took one slow breath. He stood up. He walked to the front of the room. Daniel began speaking. The first sentence was quiet. The second sentence was better. Then, suddenly, he made a mistake. He pronounced one word incorrectly. A few students laughed. That tiny sound felt enormous. Daniel's mind immediately shouted, "Stop! Sit down! You cannot do this!" For a moment, the old Daniel returned, but something inside him had changed. He took another breath. Instead of running away, he smiled slightly and corrected the word. Then he continued. He finished his short speech. It was not perfect. His grammar was not flawless. His pronunciation still needed work. But when he returned to his seat, something powerful happened. Daniel realized he had survived the moment he had feared for so long. The students had laughed, but the world had not ended. He had made a mistake, but he had continued. He had felt fear, but fear had not stopped him. That afternoon, Daniel sat quietly and thought about what had happened. For years, he had believed confidence came before action. He thought he needed to feel confident before speaking English. Now, he understood the truth. Confidence often comes after action. You speak while nervous. You make mistakes. You survive them. You try again. Slowly, your brain learns that you are capable. Daniel's meditation practice had not magically removed his fear. It had given him enough space to choose what to do with it. That difference changed everything. But the next challenge would be even harder. A few days later, Daniel was practicing English with some classmates when he made another mistake. This time, someone laughed loudly and said, "Maybe English is not for you." The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. Suddenly, all his old doubts came rushing back. Maybe I'm not talented. Maybe I started too late. Maybe I will never become fluent. Maybe I should stop trying. That evening, Daniel returned home, feeling defeated. He opened his English notebook, but could not concentrate. The negative voice inside him became louder and louder. You will never be good enough. Everyone is better than you. Why are you wasting your time? Daniel felt the familiar urge to escape. He reached for his phone. Then he stopped. He remembered the first lesson meditation had taught him. A thought is not a command. He placed the phone down and sat quietly. For 5 minutes, he watched his thoughts. You will never succeed. He noticed it. People are better than you. He noticed it. You should quit. He noticed it. But this time, Daniel did not believe every thought. He asked himself, is this a fact or is this fear speaking? The answer became clear. It was fear. One person had laughed at him, and his mind had turned that single moment into a prediction about his entire future. Daniel suddenly understood how his mind had controlled him for years. One failure became, I am a failure. One mistake became, I cannot learn. One bad day became, my life will never change. His mind had been creating stories, and he had been believing every one of them. Meditation had taught him to observe those stories instead of automatically accepting them. Daniel opened his notebook and wrote a new sentence. A mistake does not define my ability. It shows me what I need to practice. He read the sentence again. Then he wrote another, I do not need to be perfect. I only need to continue. That night, Daniel made a decision. He would not measure his progress by perfection. He would measure it by courage. Every time he practiced despite fear, he would count it as a victory. Every time he spoke despite mistakes, he would count it as progress. Every time he returned after failure, he would count it as discipline. The next day, something unexpected happened. His teacher asked a simple question in English. Daniel knew the answer. His heart began racing again. He could feel the fear returning, but this time he raised his hand. His voice was not perfect. His sentence was not perfect, but he spoke. When he finished, nobody laughed. Even if they had, Daniel knew he would have continued. That single sentence became a turning point. It was not a dramatic achievement. Nobody gave him a trophy. Nobody celebrated. But inside Daniel, something shifted. He had finally discovered that confidence was not something he had to wait for. It was something he could build through small acts of courage. From that day forward, Daniel created a simple routine. Every morning, 5 minutes of meditation, then 10 minutes of English listening, then 5 minutes of speaking aloud. He did not care if his pronunciation sounded strange. He did not care if he forgot words. He practiced anyway. Some days were easy. Some days were difficult. Some days he felt motivated. Other days he wanted to quit. But the 5-minute meditation gave him a place to return to. Whenever his mind became noisy, he breathed. Whenever fear appeared, he observed it. Whenever he wanted to escape, he paused. Slowly, the effects began spreading into every part of his life. He became more focused during his studies. He stopped checking his phone every few minutes. He began finishing assignments earlier. His grades improved. His English vocabulary grew. His listening became sharper. Most importantly, his relationship with himself began to change. Daniel no longer called himself lazy whenever he struggled. He no longer believed every negative thought. He began treating himself like someone who was learning instead of someone who was failing. His confidence grew quietly, one small victory at a time. Then, one afternoon, his college announced a major event. Students would have the opportunity to give a presentation in English in front of hundreds of people. Daniel read the announcement twice. His heart immediately started beating faster. The old fear returned, but this time it was different. He did not run away. Instead, he asked himself a question: what if this is the moment I have been preparing for? For the first time, Daniel did not see fear as a wall. He saw it as a doorway. He submitted his name, and when his name appeared on the final list of speakers, Daniel knew he had entered the biggest test of his life. The 5 minutes that had once seemed too small to matter had brought him to a moment he never imagined he could face. But now, with hundreds of eyes waiting for him, Daniel would have to discover whether those 5 minutes had truly changed him. The night before the presentation, Daniel sat alone in his room, staring at the notes he had prepared. Tomorrow, hundreds of people would be watching him. The thought made his stomach tighten. He imagined standing on the stage and forgetting everything. He imagined his voice shaking. He imagined people judging his English. He imagined making one terrible mistake and becoming a joke in front of everyone. For a few minutes, the fear became so strong that Daniel almost decided to withdraw. He opened the registration page on his laptop and moved the cursor toward the cancel button. Then he stopped. A strange thought entered his mind. If I run away now, what exactly am I protecting? Daniel knew the answer. He would be protecting his fear. He would be protecting the old version of himself who always chose comfort over growth. He closed the laptop, then he placed his phone far away, sat comfortably, and closed his eyes. 5 minutes. That was where everything had started. So he returned to the beginning. He took a slow breath. He felt the air enter his body. He felt it leave. His thoughts began racing immediately. What if I fail? What if I forget? What if they laugh? Daniel noticed each thought without fighting it. He remembered the first meditation he had ever tried when 5 minutes had felt impossible. Back then, his mind had controlled him completely. Now, his mind was still noisy, but Daniel had learned something powerful. He did not need to silence his mind to control his life. He only needed to stop allowing every thought to make his decisions. He breathed again. I am nervous, he admitted to himself, and I can still do this. Another breath. I might make mistakes. Another breath. And I can still continue. Another breath. Slowly, the fear became smaller. It did not disappear completely. It did not need to. Daniel finally understood that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was the decision to move while fear was still present. He opened his eyes. The presentation was still waiting for him. The audience would still be there. Nothing outside had changed, but something inside him had changed. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the college early. The auditorium was larger than he had imagined. Rows of seats filled the room, and hundreds of students were already arriving. Daniel stood backstage holding his notes. His hands were shaking. He could hear other speakers practicing. Some sounded confident, some sounded completely fluent. For a moment, comparison began attacking him again. "Look at them," his mind whispered. "They are better than you." Daniel almost believed it. Then he remembered his journey. Those students had their own stories. He had his. He was not there to become someone else. He was there to become a better version of himself. He put his notes down. He took one slow breath, then another. His name was announced. Daniel walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavy. His heart was beating so loudly that he thought everyone could hear it. He reached the microphone. Hundreds of faces looked back at him. For one terrifying second, his mind went completely blank. The old Daniel would have panicked. He would have apologized, rushed away, or stared at the floor. But the new Daniel knew what to do. He breathed. Just one breath. Then another. He looked at the audience and remembered the 5 minutes that had changed his life. He remembered the phone he had placed face down. He remembered the first terrible meditation. He remembered missing a day and starting again. He remembered the student who laughed at his English. He remembered raising his hand anyway. He remembered every small moment when he had chosen to return. Then Daniel began speaking. His first sentence was slow. His voice was slightly shaky, but it was clear. He continued. After a few sentences, his breathing became easier. His mind became calmer. He stopped thinking about whether everyone liked him. He stopped trying to be perfect. He simply focused on the next sentence. One sentence at a time. One breath at a time. One moment at a time. Daniel spoke about learning, failure, fear, and growth. He shared how difficult it had been to focus. He talked about how easily distractions had stolen his time. He explained that he had once believed success required a huge transformation, but eventually he discovered that change could begin with something incredibly small. 5 minutes of silence, 5 minutes of awareness, 5 minutes of choosing where to place his attention. The audience listened. Daniel made a few mistakes. One word came out incorrectly. Another sentence was not grammatically perfect, but he did not stop. He corrected himself and continued. And then something surprising happened. Daniel began enjoying the presentation. The fear that had seemed so powerful the night before was no longer controlling him. He was standing in front of hundreds of people, speaking in English, and doing the very thing he had once believed was impossible. When he reached the final sentence, he paused. He looked across the auditorium and said, "You do not need to change your entire life in one day. Sometimes you only need 5 quiet minutes to change the direction of your future." Then he finished. For a second, the room was silent. Then the audience applauded. Daniel stood still, almost unable to believe it. The applause was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that he had finished. He had faced the fear that had controlled him for years. He had not become fearless. He had become stronger than his fear. When Daniel returned home that evening, he did not celebrate by buying something expensive. He did not post a dramatic announcement online. Instead, he opened the old notebook he had found months earlier. He turned to the page where he had written his dreams. Speak English fluently. Get excellent grades. Build a successful career. Help my family. Become confident. Daniel looked at those words and smiled. He had not achieved everything yet. His journey was still continuing. But for the first time, he could see real progress. His grades were improving. His English was improving. His focus was stronger. His confidence was growing. His relationship with his phone had changed. Most importantly, his relationship with his own mind had changed. Daniel finally understood that meditation had never been about escaping from life. It had been about becoming present enough to live it. It had taught him to notice his thoughts without becoming trapped inside them. It had taught him to pause before reacting. It had taught him that discipline was not perfection, but returning. It had taught him that fear could be present without being in control. It had taught him that small actions repeated every day could create enormous changes over time. Months became years. Daniel continued his 5-minute practice. Sometimes he meditated for longer, but he never forgot the power of starting small. His life continued to change. He became more disciplined with his studies. He developed stronger English communication skills. He gained confidence in conversations. He learned to manage stress more effectively. He built a successful career and eventually achieved many of the goals he had written in that old notebook. But years later, when people asked Daniel about his success, they expected him to talk about his education, his career, or his biggest opportunities. Instead, Daniel always told them the same story. He talked about a young man who could not focus, a young man who wasted hours on his phone, a young man who failed an important exam and thought his future was finished, a young man who believed he was lazy and incapable. Then he told them about 5 minutes, 5 minutes that looked meaningless, 5 minutes that did not change his life immediately, 5 minutes that did not make him successful overnight, 5 minutes that did not remove his problems. But those 5 minutes taught him how to return, and returning changed everything. Daniel realized that his life had not transformed because of one magical meditation session. It transformed because he made one small decision and repeated it. He chose 5 minutes instead of endless scrolling. He chose awareness instead of automatic reaction. He chose practice instead of perfection. He chose to return after failure instead of giving up, and those choices slowly changed the person he became. His greatest achievement was not the presentation. It was not his career. It was not becoming fluent in English. His greatest achievement was learning that he was capable of directing his own life. He no longer believed every negative thought. He no longer allowed fear to make every decision. He no longer waited for motivation before taking action. He understood that his mind was powerful, but it needed training. And just like any skill, mental strength could be developed through consistent practice. Daniel's story eventually became something he shared with others who felt trapped in distraction, fear, and self-doubt. Whenever someone told him, "I do not have enough time to change," Daniel smiled and asked them one question: "Do you have 5 minutes?" Most people did. Then he told them to begin there. Not tomorrow. Not when life became easier. Not when they felt motivated. Today, 5 minutes to sit quietly, 5 minutes to breathe, 5 minutes to observe the mind, 5 minutes to practice English, 5 minutes to read, 5 minutes to take one step toward the person they wanted to become. Because Daniel had learned something that he wished he had understood years earlier. A future is not built only through huge decisions. It is built through tiny decisions repeated when nobody is watching. Every day gives you hundreds of choices. You can follow every distraction, or you can protect your attention. You can believe every negative thought, or you can question it. You can let fear decide your actions, or you can breathe and take one small step forward. You can wait for the perfect moment, or you can begin with what you have right now. Daniel's 5 minutes had not magically solved his life. They had simply changed the direction in which he was walking. And sometimes, that is all you need. Because if you walk in the wrong direction for years, even small changes in direction can completely transform where you eventually arrive. So, if you are watching this story and you feel distracted, anxious, afraid, or stuck, remember Daniel. You do not have to fix everything today. You do not have to become perfect. You do not have to defeat every fear before you begin. Start small. Give yourself 5 quiet minutes. Put the phone down, close your eyes, breathe, notice your thoughts, let them come and go, then return to what matters. Tomorrow, do it again. If you fail, return. If you get distracted, return. If you become afraid, breathe, and return. If you lose motivation, return. Your power is not in never falling. Your power is in learning how to come back. 5 minutes may seem too small to change your life, but never underestimate the power of a small action repeated consistently. A single breath can calm a racing mind. A single sentence can begin a conversation. A single mistake can teach a valuable lesson. A single decision can change the direction of a future. And sometimes, 5 quiet minutes can become the beginning of everything. Years after his transformation, Daniel would still remember that young man sitting alone in his room, holding an old notebook, and wondering where his life would be 5 years later. He wished he could go back and tell that younger version of himself something important. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not incapable. You are simply untrained. Your mind has learned habits, and habits can be changed. Your attention has been scattered, and attention can be trained. Your confidence is weak, but confidence can be built. Your future is not decided by your worst day. It is shaped by what you choose to do next. That was the lesson Daniel carried for the rest of his life. The greatest transformation does not always begin with a dramatic moment. Sometimes it begins quietly, when nobody is watching, with one person deciding to give themselves 5 minutes. 5 minutes to breathe, 5 minutes to think, 5 minutes to stop running, 5 minutes to face the mind instead of escaping from it. And from those 5 minutes, a new life can slowly begin. So perhaps the real question is not whether 5 minutes can change your life. The real question is, what could happen if you gave yourself 5 minutes every day for the next 5 years? What could you learn? Who could you become? How much stronger could your mind be? How much more confident could you feel? How many dreams could finally move from your notebook into reality? Daniel never knew the answer on that first morning. He only knew that he was tired of living the same way. So he started with 5 minutes. And those 5 minutes became a habit. The habit became discipline. The discipline became focus. The focus became confidence. The confidence created courage. The courage opened doors. And behind those doors was a future he once believed was impossible. That is the power of small beginnings. You do not need to transform your entire life today. You only need to change what you do next. So put the phone down for a moment, take one deep breath, give yourself 5 minutes. Your life may not change instantly, but perhaps, just perhaps, you will begin changing the direction of your future. And sometimes, changing the direction is the first step toward changing everything.